Welcome back to Music Rankings, Reviews, and More, and today we have an interesting topic. This was, I'm pretty sure, suggested by some of our followers on Twitter, and we made a document of some ideas, and this one is what we chose for today. We thought this would be an interesting idea. Basically what this video will be is top 10 albums, basically that got us to be instantly a fan of a certain band, even if we hadn't heard their other material at all. No, like, essential band essentials listening, no other albums. Like, we had heard this album in full length first before their other albums, and that instantly made us a fan of a band, even if we didn't like the band before. And yeah, these are just like 10 albums for us. Some of these are the band's most popular, I'm sure, but others are, definitely not their most popular or definitely not their best. These don't have to be a band's best albums, just the ones that got us instantly hooked us onto a certain band, even if we did not like the band before, like if we had casually heard them but hadn't listened to, like, say, a full album, for example. So coming in at my number 10 spot, I have Purple Rain from Prince. Obviously, this is his, quintessential album, but the reason I thought it was good to include it, and I'm not even, like, a huge fan of Prince, but, for pop artists, I would definitely rank him among the best, also some of my favorites. But like, the reason, how I got into this album essentially was, it's kind of a dumb reason, but I was basically watching a reaction video from this one channel, Brad Taste of Music, and I was listening along, and I was like, damn, this album's really good. I don't know why I haven't really, like, ever listened to it in full. And then, like, obviously I went to go check out some other Prince albums, which are pretty good. I wouldn't say they're at the level of Purple Rain, but, like, that was definitely, like, obviously I knew his hit songs, but this album also has, like, his, like, huge hits, Let's Go Crazy, When Doves Cry, the title track, I Would Die For You. But yeah, so like half the album is hits, and then the other half is like a pretty strong deep cut. So yeah, that's definitely my number 10 pick.
Okay, so yeah, number 10 I have Slippery When Wet by Bon Jovi. So this is, of course, their big album, lots of hits. Like, I think it was around like 2020 or so when it's really got into older music in general. And, like, of course I had heard, like, some of their hits, everyone knows, like, Living on a Prayer, You Give Love a Bad Name, stuff like that, but, like, listening to the full album got me, and I really liked it. Eventually went through, listened to other stuff, and now I enjoy them quite a bit, so definitely a pretty good album, and it is their most popular album, so it's an easy way to get into them, for sure.
Yeah, for my number 10, I have 10 by Pearl Jam. Drum roll. Okay. So, prior to listening to this album, I used to really, like, I don't know, I just did not like Pearl Jam at all. I thought they were massively overrated. I thought this album was, like, the most overrated album without even listening to it. I don't know why I was dumb enough. But then I listened to it in full, and I'm like, oh, I was the idiot. And yeah, it's a great album. It helped get me into Pearl Jam and rock, I guess.
Coming in at number 9, I have Fear Inoculum by Tool. So basically how I got into this album was, I was doing football practice. Obviously I wouldn't do that anymore for lots of reasons, but when I was doing football practice, this was about like when I was in 8th grade probably, and the album had just dropped, and my dad didn't even have any clue, and he saw it on his his phone, and he was listening to music, and then he saw it pop up, and he was like, oh, new Tool album. And so he listened to it while he was running on the track, waiting for me to be done with practice. And then when we got in the car, he started continuing the album, and that's when Zempest came on, and I was like, that song is the shit. That song is great. And without knowing, like, any of their other music, or going into it, I was like, I'm a fan of this band. Like, I already knew it right then and there. It's not my favorite album, but it's not my least favorite from them. Obviously, I think Lateralus, like most people would, is their best work. It's a great album. I went back into their stuff, after I heard Fear Inoculum. But I also wasn't that into music in 2019, so it definitely took me a while, but I would definitely say that's the album that got me to, like, notice Tool as a band, especially because of that one song. So yeah, that's my number 9 pick.
Thanks. Number 9, I have Asphalt Metals by Death Cab for Cutie. So actually, I didn't really get into them that much till, like, around like last year. For some reason, for a long time, I found them boring, even though I hardly listened to them. I know, typical dumb mindsets back then. But I just started listening to them more in general. I think just this was probably the first album of them I listened to fully, and I went back later and listened to, like, Plans, Transatlanticism, those stuff. Also really good, of course. I have a bunch of really good stuff, but this one, like, I really got into it, especially seeing them live just helped me just like them so much
Oh,
more.
yeah, I agree.
Like that.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is, but just like seeing bands live, it just makes you just appreciate them more.
Right.
And especially just Death Cab for Cutie in general, just Ben Gibbard has such like soothing vocals just on this album in general, just like one of the most soothing vocalists just in general, I think, and it's just very unique style. And also like this album is really interesting on atmosphere too. So I think overall it's a very cool album and definitely helped me get into the band.
I agree.
Yeah, my number 9, this is a very different mood from Death Cab, but I have Heartwork by Carcass. Yeah, so I used to like hate extreme metal and just kind of just metal in general. But yeah, I heard the title track from this album because one of my online friends recommended it to me, and yeah, it was a great song. And then I listened to the album fully, and yeah, now they're like one of my favorite bands of all time. They have some. I'm not a big fan of their earlier. If I had listened to their early like gore grind style first, I probably would hate this band. But yeah, I love this band. One of the best in death metal like ever, hands down.
All right, moving on to number 8. This is the album on my list because I know you guys know Purple Rain and Fear Not Him. At least I've heard of that. Like I know at least one of you has. This is the only album on my list I'm 100% sure that neither of you know. All right, coming in at number 8, I have Zonkey by Umphrey McGee. So yeah, my parents saw this band live either later towards last year or the beginning of this year. Don't exactly remember when. And this is probably not one of their better albums, and that's mainly because basically what this album does, but it is probably their most unique. Basically takes popular songs and combines 2 of them. So like an example of that would be like there's like they basically combine like Bulls on Parade with like a song by Weezer, and they have like very interesting mashups. Also there's like one that's like Dreams by Fleetwood Mac with like a Michael Jackson song. I don't remember which one, but yeah, very interesting concept. But I admire like the creativity, and like I also thought the instrumentation was pretty cool in the vocal style. So yeah, got me a fan into the band. I wouldn't say like kind of similar to Prince, my pick. Like I wouldn't say I'm like huge on the band, but it definitely helped me to like appreciate them more. So yeah, that's my number 8.
Number 8, I have American Beauty / American Psycho by Fall Out Boy. This was just one of the first albums I remember liking in general. I think I listened to this around 2015, 2016-ish when it came out. I just wasn't that much into music since like till like 2020, so I definitely enjoyed this album a bit, and it eventually got me to check out more of the albums, and it ended up being one of my favorite bands. And while this isn't one of my favorites anymore, I still just find it pretty fun just to listen to, and I do like the hits, although they're far from their best songs in general. Like stuff like Centuries, while I do still like it, 1 has been played way too much, 2 is just they have a lot better, I just think. But yeah, and I do like the deep cuts too quite a bit, and it's just like a fun album, and it got me to the band, so yeah.
Number 8, I have Crack the Sky by Mastodon. Mastodon, I was already into metal at the time, but I just never listened to Mastodon, even though like I've heard about them a lot. And then like some people, like some of my friends, wouldn't stop gushing about this album, and I was telling them to shut up about it because they were being annoying. But then I finally gave it a listen, and yeah, now it's like one of my favorite albums of all time, and I listen to this album non-stop. And yeah, now Mastodon's one of my favorite bands.
Nice. Alright, moving on to number 7. So this is an album that is similar to not Asphalt Meadows, but in like the same way for Christoph, like seeing the band live definitely helped. Except for example, this is a band that is not in their prime. So number 7, Who's Next by The Who. When we saw them in concert, I hadn't really listened to any of their full albums front to back, even though I did actually buy vinyl of that album shortly after the concert. But yeah, that concert and album, which they played a lot of the songs from the album, of course, at the concert, definitely helped me to be a fan of the band. And then I like listened to it, on my phone because I didn't have the vinyl yet, and I was like, it's a pretty good album. It has like your fair share of hits, like Won't Get Fooled Again, Barbara Riley, etc. But it also has a lot of great deep cuts, and it basically just got me to be a bigger fan of The Who. It's definitely my favorite album by far from them, because I would place it in my top 50 favorite albums, but it's just like, and I wouldn't say their other albums are anywhere near as good, but they still have other good albums, but this was the album that kind of just made me like an instant fan, even because I wasn't really into them that much before. They came on the radio sometimes, but not a ton, for me at least, and I was just like, all right, whatever. But yeah, hearing like an album in whole definitely puts it in perspective, and you know, makes it not just about like the singles and like the songs you hear on the radio. So
Nice. Okay, number 7, I have The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance. This is one of my favorite like concept albums of all time, pretty much now. It's just really interesting about like death and has like different concepts and stuff, and I just love the music, very catchy, and like, so I somewhat like this band. I knew like a couple songs that I liked, and I didn't go much further than that for a long time, but eventually I decided to start basically listening to the full album, and I actually like really liked it, and I listened to it like quite a bit, and I still do sometimes, and I just think it's a really interesting and fun listen, especially like I love the title track. It's just a lot of like really catchy songs and just an interesting concept album, and I definitely went into like some of their other albums and stuff, and I like those quite a bit too, so yeah.
Nice. Once again, moving in a completely different direction, I have Covenant by Morbid Angel. So this was when I was first getting into like more extreme forms of metal, and this is kind of what got me used to growls and blast beats, and just, you know, like constant tremolo picked riffs. But yeah, I remember hearing Rapture for the first time and like loving it and like going crazy and like playing it on repeat. And yeah, it's one of the first like metal albums I got into, or death metal albums I got into, and yeah, great album.
all right. Moving on to number 6. At number 6, I have Damn the Torpedoes by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. I had known like the hits from Tom Petty from like both the Heartbreakers, you know, like Refugee, Don't Do Me Like That, but I had also known like his soul stuff, you know, Running Down a Dream, Free Fallin', etc. And I always thought like it was good, but again, kind of like The Who, except I never saw Tom Petty and Heartbreakers in concert, obviously, but like it was like kind of a similar band in terms of like,
Yeah.
I had to hear like the full album rather than like just hearing songs, because I always liked Tom Petty's songs, but I never like thought maybe I should like actually check out an album. And like I think I did actually check out one of his solo albums, but I wasn't like too into it at the time. But like hearing it with the Heartbreakers, I definitely felt like there's like more guitars, and obviously like because, you know, I like guitars more in music, yeah, that's just kind of what attracted me to that. So I decided to listen to that, and I do have it on vinyl as well, and now I'm a pretty big fan of them and that album, so yeah.
So number 6, so this is, you can say this is kind of cheap, but Greatest Hits by Journey. Obviously not a studio album, it's a compilation album, I know, but yeah, so Journey is just my all-time favorite band. There's just like since around like 2020 or so, like again, that's when I really started getting into music, and I really like Journey's hits, so I just kind of listened to like the full Greatest Hits, and like I like pretty much all of it, and I of course later went on Escape, Infinity, Razor and Radio, all their stuff pretty much. Like I have a ton of great music, and I just like enjoy them like a lot, and yeah, I just think they're a great band. Like Greatest Hits just does a perfect job, like tons of like great amazing songs, and like while it's not a studio album, it definitely is just a great way to get into the band, just by like it just encapsulates what like the band is as a whole.
Especially because it leaves you with like so many awesome deep cuts just
Oh,
go
yeah.
after. It doesn't like spoil it like too much.
Yeah, there's Greatest Hits too,
Hits.
but
yeah,
you know, like,
that also has that crappy song from Trial by Fire. So we don't talk
But-
about that.
yeah, it's just a great collection of songs that just like really gets you into the band if you enjoy it quite a bit, and you're like, okay, I really like these. Like I've been listening to the other albums, so I get that. Yeah.
Nice. My number 6 is Images and Words by Dream Theater. So prior to listening, I got into this album like at the start of 9th grade actually, so quite a while ago. But yeah, at the time, I don't know, I never bothered checking it out because obviously the very long run times. But yeah, I heard Pull Me Under, and I was kind of like instantly hooked. And yeah, I've been playing it non-stop for a while. It's one of my favorite albums of all time, but Pull Me Under is honestly kind of mid on that album, but it's what got me into the band. Very beautiful, very great album. Obviously, it's probably not for everyone because, you know, the cheesy vocals, 12-minute songs, but yeah.
All right, moving up to number 5 here. This album so far has been the only one to be mentioned, and this is by Nick. So number 5, I have 10 by Pearl Jam. So yeah, it's basically the same story. I feel like it's just even dumber than Nick's story. I literally, my opinion on it's even dumber, trust me. Basically, my opinion on this album was basically influenced by Nick's opinion on that album, so I knew nothing about this band, and I basically copied your opinion. I was like, yeah, you're right, that album does suck.
I'm sorry. I did not mean
and I didn't know it. And I was like, yeah, Nevermind is better because it Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Yeah, I said that too.
It Smells Like Teen Spirit isn't even the best song on that album, so whatever.
Okay, so let's go off track. Do not base your opinions on other people's opinions. Make up your own opinions first.
We were a lot more
basically
close-minded back then. Like, I think all of us just made assumptions. Stuff, and
we don't talk about that.
I don't do that anymore.
We do not talk about that.
Yeah, but basically, anyway, getting back to that. 10, that's basically how I got in. One day, I randomly decided to check it out. And I didn't even know other Pearl Jam's albums really, or like hits. I mean, I knew their hits from other albums, but I didn't know what albums they were on per se. But then when I heard this album, it got me. I was already like a minor fan, but then I was definitely a fan after hearing that album. I didn't need to know I didn't need to know their other albums because this album was like super great. Definitely a good gateway album. I mean, it is their debut, and it is arguably their best album. So it is the perfect gateway in both of those senses. But yeah, that album just single-handedly basically got me into Pearl Jam. So
number 5. So I have Bleed American by Jimmy Eat World. So I've always loved some of the singles off this, mainly the middle. Just great song. It's very short but very sweet, basically how to describe it. And eventually, I think around early this year or last year, I listened to the full album. I enjoyed it quite a bit. But basically, I re-listened to it some more times, and then eventually I decided going more into their other albums. I listened to quite a few, like the one with the single Pain, I think that came in 2004, and I enjoyed that album quite a bit, and quite a few of the albums, and I like pretty much all of it. They're varying degrees, but it's definitely helped me get into the band quite a bit. I still think it's the best album for sure, but it's just really good, and it's grown on me, and the band has grown on me too in general, so it's pretty cool.
Nice. My number 5, we have one that I don't really listen to as much as I used to, but it's White Pony by Deftones. Like, about a couple years ago, this was my favorite album. Obviously, it's changed, but I still like it. But, this really got me into, like, metal as, like, a whole, because previously I was just listening to, like, rock, alternative rock, and this...
Some thrash, too.
Some thrash, cool, Metallica. Yeah. Get to that. But, this album, I think it was Digital Bath, the first song I heard. And, yeah. It's a great album. Obviously, I rarely listen to it now, but very important album for me getting into more music, and probably their best album.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Alright, moving on to number 4, and this is definitely my favorite album of the albums on this list, but again, that's not what this list is about. It's just like which one I ranked them based off of most important, I guess, for getting into a band for me, in my taste. But yeah, number 4, I have Megalithic Symphony by Awolnation. So my family played this religiously in the car for like probably a year or two on end, like nonstop, and it never got old. But I also never thought to like maybe I should look into this band, and I eventually did in like probably 2020. And then I realized how good they were, and I also got Christoph into the band too, because of that. Because I actually decided to I was like, wait, what's that band my family used to play that one album from in the car all the time? I wonder if they made any other good music. And spoiler, yeah, they did. But this album is their best album. It is their debut, but it is also the perfect gateway. It combines so many genre elements, of course, of different genres. And yeah, that album, I was just that album really stuck with me because of the replay value. So it did make me want to go more into the band. It definitely made me single-handedly a fan. I was like, even if their other work kind of sucks, this album is too damn good for me not to say I'm at least a minor fan, So yeah.
Okay, number 4, I have Boston, self-titled, Boston by Boston. So they've turned into one of my favorite bands. I think everyone's heard at least some of the hits on the radio, especially classic rock radio. Everyone knows More Than a Feeling, Peace of Mind, Smokin'. There's a bunch that are popular. It's just a great album, and I don't remember when it was, but I ended up listening to it, enjoying it quite a lot, just listening to more and more. I actually got it on vinyl too, which is cool, and then later went down to listen to other stuff. And while, it's not as good, I definitely peaked in the first album, but damn, this album is amazing. This is seriously one of the best albums. It's crazy. It's only 8 songs, but like all the songs are near amazing. They're just amazing in general. Like everything's great on here. Just crazy good album.
I would
And
say
love-
every
I
song
love
is
Boston.
basically amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only
Yeah.
8 of them, so.
It's just I love Boston, especially this album.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Nice.
Yeah.
My number 4, keeping kind of like the same vibe as my previous pick, it's Hybrid Theory by Linkin Park. Yeah, they know I used to gush about this album nonstop, like pretty much all the time. But yeah, this is one of the first like albums that got me into like kind of just music as a whole. Like obviously, everyone knows In the End, everyone knows the singles, but yeah, in 9th grade, I kind of just only played this album and like a few others like nonstop. So naturally, I've gotten kind of tired of it, but yeah, I still think it's a great album. Might be their best, not sure. It's between that and another album, but definitely a very important album for me.
Alright, top 3, here we come.
Not really top 3 for me, but
Yeah, you know what I mean. Just like the last 3.
yeah.
So, number 3, this is one of the fans' like least favorite albums, but it's actually my 3rd favorite from the band now that I got more into them, which is a very controversial take, and obviously I would not say that ever, except I'm saying it to you on video, so I guess it doesn't matter anymore. But I have at number 3, Walk Around the Moon from Dave Matthews Band. I wrote this down on my albums to check out because I follow this like Wikipedia page, basically just any albums from any notable artist it has, and I like wrote it down because I was like, okay, I've always known of this band, might as well check it out. I also write down artists I know for a fact I'm not a fan of, you know, like if there's a new Cardi B album or AJR album which haven't been announced, I'd write it down, even though I would probably not like that. But I had not really listened to this band much. I knew some of his solo hits and I knew some of his hits with his band, but I was just like, yeah, they're fine, I guess. I feel like it was kind of the same with Pearl Jam because I feel like Dave Matthews and Eddie Vedder both have controversial vocal styles.
Yeah.
You love it or you hate it. I don't actually feel like when I did hear it I loved it or hated it. I just kind of was fine with it. It was kind of whatever, but I was never that into them. But I heard this album and I feel like they're one of those bands where if you actually like sit down and have the time to like listen, it makes a lot more sense rather than like me trying to like listen and like be in the car on my phone. I don't know, more distracting. And this album like ended up being super colorful. So far, it's one of my favorite albums of the year, but it's not my favorite because there's a few albums that beat it for me. But basically, I went back into their other work after hearing this album, and I would say the only albums from them I actually like more are Before These Crowded Streets from 1998, and then Under the Table and Dreaming, which is their major label debut, and I'm pretty sure their sophomore record from '94. Which, yeah. So, yeah, that's my number 3. Definitely not their best album, but it's up there for me, and that's probably just because of recency bias, but don't care. My opinions will change eventually, maybe, so.
Nice.
Yeah, number 3. So, I have Night Visions by Imagine Dragons. So, this album and this band is very nostalgic to me. I think this is like one of the albums that like we played in the car, just like I don't remember exactly. I think we played the full album. Maybe it was songs just in general in the car, and it wasn't really till like it was around like 2022 was when like that was my first ever live concert, and I started listening to them like a few months before the concert because like my mom really liked them, and like I knew some of their songs and I liked some of their songs, but I didn't get into them as much, and this was just one like the big one I listened to and I really enjoyed quite a bit, and especially just after seeing them live. Plus, that was my first concert ever, so I guess that made it a bit more special. Maybe that partially affected it, but like, I just really enjoyed that, and it just made me get into the band quite a bit more. And yeah, I really like this album, and that's pretty much it.
Nice. Number 3, I have From Mars to Sirius by Gojira. Or I guess not number 3, just mine. But you get what I mean. So, prior to this, which was actually like only about a year ago, I had never listened to a Gojira song in my life, and I kept like hearing a lot about them, and they were always on my like list to check out later, and I always procrastinated on them, probably because their album covers are kind of lame. But that's beside the point. I listened to this album in full, and yeah, it was something. It was like I've heard like kind of like similar stuff to this, but like it's really just like I don't know. After listening to this in full, like I don't know, I kept repeating it and stuff, and I wouldn't say very important album to me, but definitely one of my favorite albums now. And yeah, I still don't know why I was sleeping on this band so much.
Alright, coming in at my number 2 spot for this list, again, not for favorite albums, it's a different way to rank it, but yeah, I have AM by Arctic Monkeys, and I had always known the hits off of this album for a while, and I always liked them, but again, I didn't know like some of the more, I guess I could call them deeper cuts, but I honestly feel like it's one of those albums, that and my number 1, where I had no clue these songs were on this album, because most of these were on the radio, but I'd somehow heard just about every song and knew, I was like, hey, I recognize this song whenever I listened to it. Basically how I got into this is we were on a river trip, I think somewhere in Oregon, and my dad and some of his friends that were with us on the river trip basically were talking about how great this album is. They were saying like, oh, I can like list the track list from front to back, like I've played it so many times, I have it on vinyl and stuff, and like obviously like a lot of hardcore Arctic Monkeys fans, number 1 can be hella annoying because they think this album is like their worst or one of their worst projects. I don't think anyone thinks this is worse than The Car, which they recently released, but like a lot of people think this is one of their worst projects because it's more mainstream sounding, but it is creative, even though it does have more of a mainstream sound. Like it combines elements of like rock and pop and like even like West Coast like hip hop. So yeah, it's definitely quite interesting of an album. But again, it's one of those albums where I listened to it and I was like, wait, I recognize all these songs. I don't like any of their albums quite as much, mainly because I feel like they're more straightforward rock. And I do like straightforward rock, but again, I do like rock a little bit more when there's more elements mixed in. Although with the exception of some other bands, but they're not rock bands, those are like pop bands, so like if AJR, like putting more shit into music doesn't make it good. But again, with rock bands, I definitely feel like sometimes that can be the case. So, yeah, it's kind of my introduction to the band, and yeah.
Okay, number 2. So I have Double Dare by Waterparks. Anyone who knows me knows I like this band a lot. So basically,
Yeah.
around like last year, I think it was December, so I had like a few online friends who just like were basically obsessed with this band and like had been recommending it to me for a while. And I think part of it was like, so in November, of course, concert, Mysteries, Bad Flower at Awolnation. Basically Bad Flower, like I had heard they were like somewhat of a similar style, so I think that had part of to do with it. So in December, finally, because I kept getting recommended it, I checked out like a few of their popular songs, like that a lot. And then I listened to this, which is their debut album, and I just liked it a lot. I think it has a very interesting style. It kind of mixes a lot of things. It's just super catchy. It's like has elements of like pop punk or like pop rock or like even some synth pop, just like a bunch of different things. And I love all the songs on here pretty much. So yeah, I really enjoyed this, and it's still my favorite album by the band.
Nice.
Nice.
Number 2, this is probably the most important album for me on this list. It's Dirt by Alice in Chains. So prior to listening to this, like in a similar vein to like Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory, this really got me like passionate about music. Like I don't know how I hadn't heard the hits before, but somehow I haven't. But yeah, I probably would not be into music like as a whole, or at least care about it nearly as much if it wasn't for this album. And I still listen to it very frequently, and yeah, it also helped me get into like grunge and alternative rock and all that stuff. But yeah, still one of my top 10 favorite albums of all time, and definitely my favorite by the band.
Coming in at the number 1 that most single-handedly, at least speaking, that's basically how I ranked them. That got me into this band, and I wouldn't say I wrote the band off, because there was always that one song from their 1984 album, The Unforgettable Fire, that I liked, Pride in the Name of Love. I think you know what band I'm talking about. But this is Achtung Maybe by U2, and I was not a fan because, like many people, and the same reason why a lot of people didn't like them and don't still, is because they're boring. That's what a lot of people think. But
yeah,
the thing is with Achtung Maybe, it's by far their least boring album, and I wouldn't even say it's even minorly boring, because the edge, here's the thing, this album is more about the edge than Bono, which is important to me liking U2. And I don't like any of their albums anywhere near as much, although I would say the Joshua Tree is not actually as close as people think in quality. A lot of people would put it over. but it's definitely their second best in my opinion, and still I would say that's a great album. But this is by far my favorite album from the band because it's more focused on the bass work and Edge's guitar work and the drumming, rather than Bono's vocals. And I actually like Bono as a vocalist now, but the thing is like I'd rather they be focused on Edge because he's one of the more. I'd put him and Tom Morello as like two of the most creative guitarists of the '90s. What they did with their sound, like the reverb and pedals on this album from his guitar are absolutely like whack and insane. The riffs are pretty cool, and yeah, it definitely got me into the band. And basically, how it got me into the band was like, you guys were basically over at my house, and I know you didn't catch on to this because, like, you probably were just like, oh, I'm fine with you two, whatever. But I felt like I really didn't like them at the time, and my parents were saying, well, you gotta like. To get into them, you truly like gotta listen to like the Joshua Tree and Achtung maybe front to back. And I started with this album because I felt like I had heard more from the Joshua Tree, but like my last pick, when I heard this album, I was like, how do I know every single song on this album? I just like completely forgot about them, but they've always been like in the back of my mind somewhere, I guess, because I did remember them. But I knew like about 11 or 12 out of 12 songs and total. So that is insane. That just shows you how popular this album was. But yeah. Definitely my favorite by the band, and definitely a gateway. So if you hate U2, I'd recommend this album. If you like U2, maybe the Joshua Tree. I don't know, like U2
well, if
fans.
they like U2, I don't think you need to recommend them U2.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So if you hate U2, probably this album then, because I don't see the Joshua Tree making you single-handedly a fan. You might like it if you listen to this album first, though. Is what I'm saying. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. I've always just liked a few of these songs, but I've never really gone past that. So.
This album is crazy good. Their other albums are good, but not like this status for me.
Alright, Christoph.
Okay, so number one, the one Cyrus mentioned a few picks ago.
Oh yeah, I know.
Megalithic Symphony, Awolnation. So basically, he was saying he obviously knew the band before me, but then because he liked it, he recommended it, and then I got into it a lot, and I just loved it. I kept listening to it more and more, and eventually became like nearly my favorite album of all time. There's one other one on this list, but it's basically tied with that for me. Every song on this album, obviously not counting the short songs or interludes, but every song on this album is amazing. And like, Sail is one of the worst, if not the worst, on this album, which is
but it is arguably the best or second best mainstream hit of the 2010s.
True.
So
and it's crazy like how good. I always loved Sail. Like I always really liked the song. I just for some reason never really went into one of the songs.
The fact that that's probably like the worst or second worst full-length song.
Which is insane, 'cause I still absolutely love Sail.
Agreed. Yeah, it's a great song.
But like all the other songs, it's just something about it is just like so crazy, so special. It's so unique. Like so many different awesome ideas. Like the electronic, the rock mix, stuff like that. Like it's just awesome. You have like from like short songs like "Kill Your Heroes," it's amazing. Another like short but sweet, and then like "Nights of Shame," like almost
which is
like
arguably their. If we want to talk best song, not most popular, Nights of Shame is probably their
and
pick.
like probably the most creative song I've ever heard. Like almost
Agreed,
like 10 minutes long, has like rapping, electronic,
literally like
singing.
most genres.
It's something special. Like if you have not heard this album, go.
And it
listen
somehow
to it.
sounds cohesive too. Not
I know,
both
it's
the album and the
just-
song. So
It's super creative, super unique, and just Awolnation in general is just a great band. I really like the other stuff too. Please release a new album. I need it.
yeah, I swear to God, if they don't, I'm gonna cry.
Anyway, speaking of 10-minute long songs, I said this wasn't ordered, but I guess this would be my number one pick. This is Ghost Reveries by Opeth. Where do I even start? Okay, so Opeth is by far my favorite band. If you know me, you know I'm obsessed with this band. But anyway, so for some context, before I listened to this album for the first time, I was like just like getting into like more like extreme thrash, like Creator, and then eventually some like early Death, and like I said, Carcass and Morbid Angel. I was into that, and I was trying to get into something heavier, which I eventually found later with like. Anyways, I listened to this album because I heard it like had growls and stuff, and yeah, I was hooked. Not because of how heavy it was or the growls. It was because of literally everything else. I loved this album for not the same reason that I thought I would love it before. It was mainly just the reason I really loved it is mainly just because the contrast between the heavy and the I guess melodic, if you want to call it that. But yeah, this album very important for me. Helped get me into like different styles of more extreme metal. Also helped me get into like prog. I used to hate prog, but after listening to this album, I love it now. And I later, shortly within the same week, listened to all their studio albums and was obsessed. Have been for like over a year. My favorite band of all time. Yeah. If you're listening to one Opeth album, most people say Blackwater Park, but I would say this one's easier to get into. So yeah, Ghost Rovers. If you had to listen to one Opeth album, I'd pick that.
Nice. So anyway, that was our personal top 10 list of albums that single-handedly got us into a certain artist or band, and yeah, and then we like probably, I would assume, went to go check out more albums from all these bands. But yeah, that is our list. Let us know if you have a list similar to that, top 5, top 10, whatever it may be. Interested to hear your thoughts. Comment if you really like any of these albums as well. Or what are your favorite albums from some of these bands. So yeah, that's our video, and peace out.